kinds? I've never heard anybody argue about that.
Well, my dog, then, is not the same species as any dog, because he's been neutered and can't interbreed with anything, so.
He's not a population either. You only got one. But I've never heard this argument you're claiming is out there. I've never heard this difference of
Well, I think we're off on a real minor rabbit trail. But,
no, you're slipping by all these absolutes that aren't really absolute. You're telling me there might be dinosaurs out there. You're also telling me that we know that there have been no new kinds happening. If it's such a damn big world, then how do we know all the kinds? I mean, it's pretty silly to say we know what's not out there.
I can say no scientist has ever observed a new kind of animal.
Gee, talk to a microbiologist. They're making new kinds of microorganisms all the time.
They're making varieties of old ones.
Oh, I bet.
They're making some that are resistant to certain bacteria, but it's still, resistant to certain drugs. It's still the same basic kind.
Oh, it is?
Stand 50 feet back and look at it. It is obviously not a tomato or a hamster.
They put human genes into plant cells. You tell me that a mixture of human and plant genetics is not a new kind?
Is it fertile? Does it reproduce itself?
It does.
Part human, part plant?
It's carrying. That's how they're making vaccines. That's how they're making antibodies. They use monkey tissue to make the vaccine the World Health Organization used for smallpox.
Oh, yeah.
They grew the virus in monkey tissue because it's got monkey genetics. Hey, that's a human vaccine. It's squirted in a human, you don't get smallpox.
Oh, yeah.
That's that bacteriophage has never existed before. It's never carried those genes before.
It's still a bacteria.
No, it's not.
What is it?
Who knows what it is? It's a half bacteria, half something else.
So you're saying, here's your argument. With human intervention.
No, it's not an argument. It's just what it is. I'm not arguing the point. I'm just saying there it is.
Here's your point. With human intervention.
A creator intervened and made it.
With intelligent input, you can mix two things together that formerly would not mix together and create something new.
Sure.
I would say that's what the creator did initially. He created things out of nothing initially, created some basic kinds, and without any intelligent intervention, there are no new kinds that have been observed. Never been observed that a new kind of animal. And the animals that do breed tend to stay within the same kind of animal. Dogs produce some kind of dog. Horses produce some kind of horse. And much of the evidence that's presented in I'll call it kind, but much of the evidence presented in our textbooks, for instance, the evolution of the horse from Eohippus to Equus, has been disproven many years ago.
Right.
But it is still presented to the high school kids.
Gee, it wasn't presented to me when I was in high school.
I've got the books. I photocopied out of the books. I don't know what books you got.
So you must have gone, I don't know where these people are going to high school, but it wasn't presented to me, and that was a long time ago.
Come to my house, 1 block north Pensacola Christian High School, and I'll show you my huge collection of textbooks, and I can assure you, I can point out many things that have been proven wrong years ago that are still in the textbooks.
Well, so are we arguing with the theory or arguing with the textbook printers? I mean, they're not the guys that are coming up with the evolutionary theory. They're the guys that are writing high school textbooks.
Oh, yeah, the guys that are writing.
There's an argument with not evolutionary theory. We got an argument with textbook publishing company.
I think we need to argue with the textbook publishing company and selection committee. As far as the general theory, it is a philosophical worldview. It is not observable. You don't observe any changes from one kind to another.
No, absolutely.
Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about your dates. You're changing the time length of the flood, and yet all your dates are according to the Bible, so how can we accept that?
Wait. I'm changing the time length of the flood.
You have the flood as being 12 months long, whereas in the Bible, it's 40 days and 40 nights.
No, the rain was 40 days and 40 nights, but the flood the rain only lasted 3 days in Iowa, but the flood lasted months, or a month.
Does it actually state that the flood lasted for 12 months?
The dates given in the Bible say 12 months. I mean, 150 days, the flood water was coming up, for 150 days, this was happening. You can read Genesis 7 and add up the numbers given there. Noah was in the ark for 40 days. The rain was 40, I agree. But the flood was a year. That's not a I'm not changing anything. Those are from the dates given there. Okay? Other questions?
We didn't get to see it, so how can we say that?
Historical evidence. The guy who caused it wrote it down. God caused it to be written down. God did. Have you ever met Abraham Lincoln?
Well, but you have to believe in that. That's a belief.
Do you believe in Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, who you've never seen?
No.
See, that's where you go from historical evidence to empirical evidence.
But you've never seen, your great-grandfather, so he probably didn't exist.
He existed. I have historical evidence. I don't have empirical evidence. I have historical evidence. That's where evolution gets into trouble.
We choose to believe the reporters. If they're not lying.
If they're lying, we're all in trouble, right?
That's right.
Sure. Maybe we're not in America. Maybe we're in France right now, But historical evidence versus empirical testable evidence. And evolution has neither. Yes?
Other people's historical evidence that contradicts these kinds of things. How about like the Sumerians who say that we were created by, that human beings were created out of these Neanderthal types as a result of trying to create primitive workers, and that the flood was a result of a planetary collision in prehistoric times. That's tremendous historical evidence, and it's all over the place. And what about that?
Okay, good point.
Their evidence.
Sure. after this flood, 4,400 years ago, after the flood, the people that survived had children and grandchildren, and they diversified into the different cultures that we see today, and most folks would agree that the population of the world seems to have started somewhere around the Mesopotamian Valley, Iraq and Iran, which would fit perfectly with the Bible account. Within a few generations, they're telling stories to their kids and their grandkids, and the stories get blown out of proportion, and today there are 250 different flood accounts. The Sumerians have one, the Babylonians have one, the Chinese have one, the Indians have one, and many of them agree in many of the details. Most of the flood accounts will say a family was saved in a boat. Now, you know, how big was the boat and how many were in the family? The details vary, but I think that's typical of mythology as it changes. But to me, the creator that made this whole place would be smart to preserve a record for us and to make sure that we do have the truth. Why on earth would he make the whole thing and then just leave it alone? I think he has taken great pains to preserve the biblical account for us. Lots of folks have died so we could have that.
What is your explanation of the survival of your historical document survival?
What is my explanation of
Yes, how did it survive?
how did the Bible survive?
Through the medieval period, since we lost everything else.
Well, we didn't lose everything in the medieval periods. You know, there were things preserved.
The Carolingian period, is that what supposedly the Bible survived from, the transcriptions of the Bible? Is that the period that you think it survived?
Well, no, I think it survived from shortly after this flood. People knew how to write all through history. There's never been a time when people didn't know how to write. I mean, archaeology says everybody has always known how to write.
The original document?
Oh, no, the original documents, I think it would be smart.
Where's the survival of your historical documents?
Well, to me, God knowing, my interpretation of this would be, God knows people tend to worship artifacts and things like this. There's enough slivers of the original cross. Every Catholic priest has one. You could build 5 cities if you put all them slivers together. You know, obviously somebody doesn't have the original one.
That's not true. I'm a Catholic priest. I don't have one.
You don't have one? You didn't get one? They used to give them one, didn't they?
No, I never have. There are supposedly, but that's not a good statement.
He's got a little different Bible, too, so we got to find out which Bible. He's got a Bible. He's got a yeah, how can we leave out his hunk of the Bible? What was wrong with that? You know, I don't know.
All right. Which is probably another rabbit trail we may want to not go off on.
Believe me, you know, rabbit trails, I'm not too sure about that. I mean, going off on, she's got an excellent point here. If it's based on the historical survival of documentation, where's the, you know, how do you get this chain of documents? I mean, you're saying everybody has myths. Sumerians have myths, blah, 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 blah. However, if you look at it historically, the Sumerians are writing down their myths before the Christians are writing down anything. They were writing down stuff before there were any Christians. So maybe everybody's copying their myths.
That's not a good way to put it.
All cultures had a flood myth. It did happen. But I just want to know where the survival of your historical documents come from for this to be the view, your view. I mean, if we're all basing everything on fact, where is the survival